Hello there guys, and welcome back to the Infernal Symphony TV YouTube channel once again. We're in for another completely 100% unplanned video today. So this is part of my, I can't even remember whether I've called it Godless Debates or Demonic Diatribe or some other name as well. There's all sorts of names I've come up with this series so far, and it seems to change on every video, so I may as well just carry on doing that really. But thank you once again for coming back in and tuning in. If you haven't watched any of the previous videos, please go back to our sort of channel and have a quick look at all the stuff there. There's still only a small amount of videos, but it is gradually improving and getting bigger over time. Hopefully the content of them is getting a bit better as well as I get a bit more used to this. But before I carry on, just a quick little intro if you haven't watched any of the other videos. My name is Demonic Bishop or Nightmare. You may see me on Discord as I debate basically the topic of religion on there. I'm also known as Demonic Bishop because I'm part of Infernal Symphony, which is my solo metal project of instrumental progressive shred guitar music, which has a very occult and anti-religion theme to it as well as medieval stuff. So just a very brief overview of what to expect from the channel and what to expect from me. So why are we here today then, guys? Right, so the last couple of videos I've done have kind of been about specific just thoughts or random things I've thought about in terms of debating religion and arguing for atheism, Satanism or anti-theism, which is obviously the stance I take if you sort of aren't aware already. So rather than talk about any specific things that I've thought about in terms of argumentation, today I'm sort of more just talking about what I've been up to lately. I got engaged in a pretty heavy and pretty long-winded discussion over Discord, speaking of which, a few days ago. I'm part of various different Discord channels and servers on there. Don't ask me to name which ones, I actually forget the names of them more often than not. But I got involved in a particularly heated and furious discussion with somebody by the name of Australian Apologist on there. This person, despite, I mean, don't get me wrong, incredibly intelligent person, obviously very well read and researched on the topic of religion, clearly some sort of Christian suppositionalist or something along those lines. But there was two major heated discussions we got into. The first one took place over several days, which was regarding the issue of slavery in the Bible and whether it was moral or not. And the second was sort of more just in general terms about the concept of God and why it is the way it is, and basically why anyone should bother believing in it really, and whether the arguments for it are actually any good or not. So obviously I took the position as an atheist that none of the arguments for God actually carry any weight to them. As a relative novice to sort of discussing and debating these issues and following the formal debate procedures, and obviously the various sort of different decorum that you need to have when debating somebody, whether formally or informally, I'm not really as good with the sort of the rules and regulations of it so far. I forget the exact name for the term, but despite that I was trying my best to really sort of communicate my position and my ideas to him. And whether it was a case of him just not really being very receptive to it is actually quite rude, to be honest, if anything. Very arrogant, which obviously, to be fair, is Christian, so you can understand why. But yeah, the major thing that I took issue with was the fact that I was basically being told that my thoughts and opinions were wrong, as well as my position, by someone who fully admitted that they basically viewed the form of slavery mentioned in the Bible as moral. And while they did give pretty good arguments for that, it's still, there's, in my view, there's absolutely no possible way that slavery in any way, shape or form can ever be moral. This person was arguing that the rules and regulations of the time evidenced in the Bible was an indication that the form of slavery that the Bible actually advocates isn't actually immoral, because it's all voluntary and they can always leave. And there's obviously, precautions in place to prevent people being beaten and stuff, which realistically speaking, I think we can all realise that unless you actually believe in this stuff, is completely and totally unrealistic. Whether it happened yesterday or 2,000 years ago, if there's slavery involved, people are going to be treated as slaves. It doesn't matter what term you want to put on it, that's what's going to happen. So that was the first major sticking point, and after that I couldn't really take anything else they had to say seriously, no matter how good the points were, no matter how well argued they were, no matter how much sense or logic they made. If that's the sort of view you're going to take, then in my view, nothing else that you think regardless of how true it is or not, should bear any weight really. Nobody should actually be listening to somebody who thinks such ridiculous things. So the second issue was on, whether God itself is actually something that realistically is something that would actually exist, and whether conversely, because of that, is it actually something worth believing in? So my main sort of tack on this sort of issue was to say all of the properties that entails God, whether it's the classical God of theism or any specific God of Abrahamic religions or otherwise, generally tends to have a certain amount of preset requisites or descriptions that tend to apply. So, in other words, omni-properties. So things like omnibenevolence, omniscience, all-powerful, all-good, all-loving, eternal, timeless, faithless. I've already gone through some of these things very, very briefly in earlier videos. And my argument was, scientifically, empirically, all of the scientific discoveries and progress that's been made throughout human history, not once have they ever indicated anything supernatural, any realistic, actually existing infinities, and so therefore logically, reasonably, and evidentially, I still don't understand epistemologically how anyone can actually come to the realization or the belief that there is actually a God, because we've had no demonstrations of it. There's absolutely no observable evidence beyond, ludicrously weak claims of testimony, anecdotal evidence, and personal experience, including what's in the Bible. And for anything else, that should never be strong enough evidence to actually convince you of anything. Yet theists, and particularly Christians, seem to, reverse this rule conveniently for themselves when it comes to believing in God, because they don't believe in alien conspiracies or alien abductions more often than not. They don't believe in loads of other stuff like that, which has just as much evidence for it, and yet they're willing to make an exception for this. So this basically funneled down into a very, very heated discussion about, because my claim was infinite properties surely would demand infinite amounts of evidence, and therefore in the scope of human history and human experience, there is never ever going to be enough evidence to prove a claim of that magnitude. My example I gave was, you're claiming that God can be infinitely powerful, so in theory it should be able to lift an infinite amount of weights. So coming from my perspective, being as my position is as a naturalist, an atheist, as an empiricist, I demand scientific proof of anything I'm going to believe in. If science can't prove it, chances are it doesn't exist, or at the very least it does exist and we're just not aware of it. But for something like this that is virtually logically impossible, how is science, and therefore humanity as a whole, going to actually demonstrate for definite that a being that can lift infinitely many things can actually exist? So my example was, we can't say definitively, we can't really say deductively, because to deduce things you need to actually observe something first, and obviously that isn't ever going to happen. So we're basically left with an abductive argument or an inductive argument, and both of those require you to make basically come up with probabilities, come up with the best forms of evidence you can that generally tend to lead and point in a certain direction. It isn't definitive, because nothing's definitive, but it gives you at least a rough idea where you should be looking, and then we can go from there and try and formulate some sort of rough observation based on what we have. And how are we going to do that with something that can do something in an infinite capacity? So again, going back to the example, my example was, let's say there's a being called X, and the claim is that X can lift an infinite amount of weights. So my sort of take on this was, exactly where do we draw the line? Exactly how many weights has being X, how many does it need to lift before we can reasonably say and conclude that it can lift infinite amounts of weights? And the answer is no amount. This is my whole point. You could lift 50 billion trillion weights, and is that anywhere close to infinity? No. So realistically, the physical laws of the universe and of our reality, including the laws of logic and the laws of science that have been discovered thus far, all of that indicates to the fact that there's never ever going to be any point in history or in the future where we're going to have enough evidence to be able to believe that something can be that infinite, especially when it's a personal being that can think, that has conscience, that can create things, that has motivations, desires. It just doesn't make sense. I really don't get it, guys. So yeah, as you can imagine, as you can probably tell from this, you can probably understand why this was such a heated debate. I admit that I wasn't as sort of focused as I should be. I did let my emotions get the better of me at certain points, and I have learned a lot from the experience. So with that in mind, if any of you guys are interested in debating religion or coming up with different arguments or trying to figure out how to do this or hone your skills, then I'll be happy to try and do that with you, because I'm in the same boat. I'm still a novice at this. I'm still feeling my way around and trying to come up with good arguments and, you know, learn from the best that I can find so far. But hopefully you guys have found this interesting. As I say, it's been a little less focused than some of the previous videos. Hopefully it's been of use to you. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. So if you like what you listen to, please, you know, like, share, comment and subscribe below. Give a little click on the follow bell so you can find out about other new videos we can come out with in the future. If you want to listen to any of Infernal Symphony's music, which discusses a lot about this sort of stuff in detail and basically is inspired by a lot of these issues we've talked about today, head to infernalsymphonyuk.bandcamp.com. And if you want to try and debate me on Discord, I'm known as Nightmare on there, NYTMAYRE. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've gotten something out of it, and come back next time.